I started with a lot of drinking, but it very rapidly that drinking got replaced with drugs, opiates, and that very rapidly turned too expensive and turned into heroin and then ultimately into fentanyl.
I had surgery on my foot and I was prescribed Percocets, and then that's when I got the first glimpse of drugs, really, narcotics. So it got to a point where heroin was a lot cheaper. It was so much easier to find.
Pills were not as available as the heroin was. You know, heroin was kind of everywhere, and you know, a fella came over one day and was like, you know, I can't find any pills for you, but here's heroin if you want to try it.
I got to college, and it was there when I was introduced to heroin, and that quickly progressed into just about anything I could get my hands on.
I had received a back injury and I was prescribed opiates. It got to a certain point to where the pain pills wasn't enough. And then finally, by that point, I was just a full-blown addict.
Began dabbling in a little bit of more illicit drugs, particularly methamphetamine. At that point, things began to spiral out of control.
Meth was something that I messed around with for about 2 years. It was all day, every day for about almost a year.
From alcohol, it turned into prescription, you know, Vicodin, and then that progressed into 10 years of heroin.
Drink me a couple cold beers, do me a shot of dope, smoke a joint, go to work, and that was my whole day.
Before I came into the Refuge, I was homeless for a good part of a year.
I was selling drugs, doing things that I never thought was going to happen.
And I was tired of, you know, missing events with my daughter and not being there to help raise her.
My daughter came crawling to me on the floor, and I went to pick her up, and my mom told me, no, you're not allowed to touch your daughter right now.
It was getting to the point to where I was gonna lose my kids for good.
And I remember saying the words, I was like, I'm one of the people that God can't save.
I have seen people OD. I've OD'd myself.
Passing out, and then like one time it was like 45 minutes later, I felt this huge rush of air, and it's just adrenaline running through my body, and nobody had ministered anything to me. And I looked over, and one of my best friends was dead next to the couch with me. He had overdosed in front of me.
The last time I OD'd was January 6th. My sister called me, like, basically, pack your stuff up, I'm coming to get you. You're gonna get help. Something's gotta change. And then that next day, she brought me in to the Refuge here at Veritas Church.
My mom told me about it, I looked it up, and it was like 13 months. Oh my gosh, I was like, that's a long time.
I was broken enough to where I was ready for 13 months. I had nothing to look forward to outside of this place.
It felt different, not even in the religious sense, it just felt very welcoming.
And I remember Jordan and Luke being there, and they were telling me, this is the place you need to be, have faith in God. And I was very hesitant because I didn't even know who God was at that time.
Knowing there was people that have been through the similar situations and I could relate to them, it develops a sense of trust. It was just all serene. I was like, wow, I'm here, I'm doing this. This is weird. The first week we did a praise and worship service, and that was the first moment that I felt a lot of forgiveness for the things that I'd done from God, and that's when the process started for forgiving myself.
I remember at praise and worship early on, just being on my hands and knees and just crying, just couldn't stop. Didn't know why. I mean, I knew some of it was probably just built up emotions from the years that I had pushed down, and just hearing the Spirit say, I love you, and just not understanding it, but willing to be open to it.
When you first come in the ministry, you see the growth in others that's ahead of you. But when you actually excel yourself through the ministry and you start seeing the growth in yourself and you're looking at your brothers and you guys are growing together, I think that was my biggest inspiration throughout the ministry.
Probably one of the most impactful times was my first 5-minute call when I called my dad to let him know, like, hey, I made it through the farm, I'm in phase 2. He stepped out of a Celebrate Recovery meeting and he just started crying. And he said, your experience has healed an entire family.
Family day, my first family day, and I just remember coming down the steps at Lancaster, and they pulled up and she got out of the car and she just came running to me with her arms open, and I just remember it clear as day. I just grabbed her up and we were like hugging and kind of spinning like it was almost cinematic, and I just felt God's ray of sunshine just beating down on me, and it was just one of the happiest moments I've ever experienced so far.
Pure joy that I finally got to see her again. She was all smiles, she doesn't know what's going on, but she was just happy and walking around the house.
He looked at me and he said, I'm really grateful that you went there. He was like, because this is the dad I remember, this is the dad I love.
I felt emotions I've never felt before. Before I came to the Refuge, I was a very emotionless person. And for me to gain back feelings that I used to have and feel new feelings that I've never had before, I knew that God was working in my life.
The Bible verse that stuck out to me, it was out of 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 9. And Paul wrote, the Lord said, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore I will boast all the more gladly in my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ may rest upon me. That hit me so hard because dealing with pride for so long, I never wanted to admit my weaknesses. I never wanted to be vulnerable. It says it right there. That's how the power of Christ works through you. And that takes so much off of you when you realize that you don't have to do it all by yourself.
Being able to understand what it truly means to lean on Him, to trust Him, to give Him all of your problems, and also praise Him in the good times and the bad. That no matter what, you stay consistent, because even when we're not faithful, He is.
My life's never been the same. It's changed for the better. I'm a whole different person. I got a different outlook.
Honestly, I'm just so thankful that God gave me, another opportunity to be better today than I was yesterday.
I've destroyed a lot of lives, and now I've learned Christ calls us to make disciples.
Seeing people come in torn apart, they skinny, they don't even remember where they are a lot of times, and less than a week later, it's a person that you can count on to be a leader. It's someone who's put on 20 pounds, has light in their eyes. That's something that makes everything worth it.
Seeing their families for the first time in 30 days, 40 days, whatever that may be. And you see that before they even speak, their family notice something different about them. They don't have to say anything. Their family knows that they're in the right place, they're in a safe place. And for me, that's the biggest reward.
The Refuge, ultimately saved my life, gave me a new outlook on life that I've never had before.
I like to think that, every day is going to be perfect now that, I am clean, and, that's not always the case. But to be able to rely on, God just to help me through with prayer and just through His Word and difficult situations is truly a blessing.
The bonds that you can build in the process of going throughout the refuge. Yeah, it's 13 months, but you can live 13 months high, or you can live 13 months sober in here and build bonds that you're never going to lose.